Mother, a game I despise quite a bit. EarthBound, a game I understand and respect, but can't get into. Mother 3, a game I never knew I needed. That's right, I finally gel with a Mother game, and I'd like to take this time to tell you why. Though, first we need to clear up the issues I have with the previous two games. If you haven't watched those videos, now would be the time to do so. The reason I'm going over some of my problems again is because there were a sizable amount of people, mostly on my EarthBound video, that didn't understand what I was going for. While I agree almost 100% with my EarthBound video and don't regret putting anything in there, I do regret not putting enough to better explain my problems. I want to take this opportunity to give a general outline of the problems I see in Mother 1 and 2, so we can bridge into a discussion on how Mother 3 fixes almost all of them. Right, so one of my core arguments against the previous two games is the archaic dungeon design and how it interacts with the rest of the game. Long labyrinths with dozens of enemies inside and a boss at the end. In the case of Mother, the dungeon design was truly labyrinthian, and finding your way to the end was often painful. EarthBound fixed the confusing nature of the dungeons, but kept the absurd length and high enemy count, which was a constant drain on PSI points. Add to this the lack of a convenient health restoration spot inside of dungeons, and you have yourself a burden on progression. Nothing sucks quite like making it to the boss of a dungeon with dead party members, forcing you to use only a quarter of your fighting prowess, or having all of your resources drained by enemies. Of course, you'll need to fight every enemy so you have enough experience to fight the boss without needing to grind, but on the second visit to a dungeon after losing to the boss, the dominant strategy would always be to flee from every battle so I can at least have a fair fight against the boss. This is a pervasive problem in both Mother and EarthBound, and though I despise Mother the most for it, EarthBound only fixes one problem in the equation. Next, we have my arguments about the game's conditioning. I brought up a few points in my EarthBound video about healing gamma and the KC bat. Each of these arguments held the belief that it was more the game's fault for being tricky with what the ability and/or item does, rather than me being an idiot for not reading the information about each new ability or item I obtained. Notice in the video I did say it was partly my fault, something most people in the comments seem to ignore. However, I will explain my point more thoroughly because even I have to admit it sounds like an incredibly stupid argument when I watch it back. I still agree with what I said, but allow me to further explain the grander issue at work here. In his video on Bloodborne, H-Bomberguy coins the phrase play conditioning, referring to the ways a game teaches you how to play through indirect means. Play conditioning doesn't necessarily have to do with tutorials, although it could depending on the context. It has more to do with how a game teaches you dominant strategies. For instance, he uses play conditioning in reference to Fallout 3 to explain why hacking is discouraged through the game's design, because the tutorial area has the password to a computer in the desk next to the computer. You technically have the option to hack the computer, but you also have the option to look through the desk, get the password, and avoid the hacking minigame altogether. He uses this to argue that Fallout 3 discourages hacking because the game tells you through the placement of specific roadblocks that hacking is probably not the most optimal way to play. Provided you check every desk next to every computer in every room, you'll probably find the password, and hacking is irrelevant at that point. This is the argument I was going for with EarthBound. Since healing gamma and the KC bat are obtained fairly late into the experience, that play conditioning was already set in stone for me. I did read item and ability descriptions when I first started because I had no idea what they did. I read the first two descriptions for healing alpha and beta, and I also learned what they did by using them and testing to see which status effects were removed because of it. Eventually, I assumed what each of the abilities would do further down the line, because it seemed self-explanatory given that each of the other ability trees were so straightforward. It was the same for weapon descriptions, which in the early game are very to the point. They just display the number with the occasional flavor text added in, but there were never any hidden strings attached. Eventually, the game conditioned me to swap out for higher numbers, and I stopped reading item descriptions because I didn't feel the need to read them. If the game had better signposted these more bizarre design choices like nesting revive in a completely unrelated category, I may have been less harsh on them. My central argument is that the game could have done a much better job conditioning me to read item descriptions if they actually mattered earlier on. It isn't even one of my core arguments against EarthBound, it's just something I put in the video that might be worth considering. Finally, I want to touch on the battle system, because I could have elaborated just a bit on why I don't particularly enjoy battles. I mentioned how EarthBound tried to fix random encounters by showing the enemies on screen and giving you the chance to avoid them. It's only an illusion though, because avoiding enemies is near impossible thanks to your slow walking speed. Increasing your movement speed can only be done via a consumable item in an already paltry inventory. Plus, the skip sandwich only lets you walk faster for a couple of seconds, and most enemies match your top speed, so good luck avoiding them through dozens of narrow corridors. It's just not possible, so random encounters are a necessity, and running away from them is never guaranteed. The crux of this issue that I neglected to bring up in my EarthBound video is that enemies will appear and disappear when the camera is no longer showing them. Say you see an enemy, but you avoid them and they leave the frame. When you go back, the enemy could be gone, or there could be another enemy, or there could only be one enemy again. That enemy is not the same enemy, no matter what. If you defeat an enemy, the sprite leaves, but if you leave that area and walk back, another enemy will spawn. This is why backtracking in dungeons is such a pain in the ass. Enemies respawn so rapidly, and it partly contributes to a lack of PSI points in dungeons, as well as the length of time it takes to complete them. Though each battle is serviceable, there's a lack of strategy. Most of the time, using the most powerful PSI move is the optimal strategy, and there's little to no thought involved until you get to a boss fight. That's one of the only times where it's reasonable to use buffs and shields, mostly because using that on regular encounters would be a complete waste of PSI points you desperately need to save for the boss at the end. Even then, using the buffs wasn't incredibly helpful, and most of the time spamming heal was enough to get you through encounters. The difficulty I was speaking of in EarthBound came from the handicaps it places on you in the endurance tests they call dungeons, and it can impair your ability to fight tougher enemies by draining you on the weaker ones first. This is why I despise Mother and can't get into EarthBound, despite mentioning several aspects I respect and admire about both, especially EarthBound. That part may have flown over a lot of people's heads, whom have the impression I'm some kind of hipster contrarian and ran headfirst into EarthBound with every intention of disliking it. I'm sorry I don't like EarthBound as much as you do. Also, I guess I'm sorry that I am a millennial? Look guys, I welcome disagreement, but there's a point where you go a little too far. Alright, so I've cleared up some of the more contentious points in the video, and I still stand by them even if I didn't do a bang-up job explaining myself. Here's the interesting part. What did Mother 3 do so right to earn my affection after my falling out with the previous two installments? It's simple. There isn't a single aspect of Mother 3 that I would consider to be a step backward. Mother 3 is everything great about EarthBound while making the great things better and fixing a lot of the trite I have to deal with to enjoy parts of EarthBound in the first place. EarthBound's commitment to oddity in its story presentation is one of the reasons I admire it, but I can't say the overarching narrative is one of its strong suits. Surely that isn't the point. The point of EarthBound is to stick out, and it does an incredible job. Yet, I don't see why the game couldn't have also had a meaningful narrative. In EarthBound, aliens invade and influence sectors of humanity to do horrible things. This is another thing I slightly misphrased in my video. Gygus does have a big influence on the evil things happening in the world, more than just the zombies in Threed. What I was attempting to say is that even though he is technically responsible for evil things happening, his presence wasn't as pronounced as it could have been. You don't get to witness the change over time unless you go back to visit your hometown in the later stages of the story. As a result, when you visit Threed for the first time, the zombies are already there, which means the point of reference for Gygus' invasion doesn't exist. Gygus doesn't have to be present to be foreboding, but more dynamic change in the world could have elevated his presence far more and made him a much bigger threat. Mother 3 has this aspect of change over time. You get acquainted with the Nowhere Islands through the eyes of a happy family of 4. The 2 brothers, Lucas and Klaus, the mother, Hinawa, and the father, Flint. The game is structured like a book with various chapters. Instead of placing you in a pseudo-open world and having you complete arbitrary tasks in order to progress, the game is segmented into chapters, beginning with the prologue where you take control of Lucas. The next chapter has you take control of Flint, the next chapter you're in control of Duster, the next chapter you're in control of a monkey named Salsa. Until all of the chapters converge, there's a time skip, and you take control of Lucas, who recruits additional party members in the form of Boney, the family dog, Duster, the son of the legendary thief Wes, and Kumatora, a princess of a long-dead kingdom. This whole beginning section is unheard of in a Mother game, especially because it sees you controlling more people than just Lucas. There were sections in EarthBound where you took control of Jeff and Pooh to reach Ness, and I enjoyed these sections, but they were generally the exception to the rule. Mother 3 has a little under half of the game made up of sections that have nothing to do with the titular main character, which I feel contributes to the stellar world building. Take the chapter where you control Flint. It starts with Thomas running around making an alarm noise, alerting the people of Tasmily there's a fire in the forest. Flint follows Thomas into the forest to help out, because there are a few villagers who haven't returned yet. Those who can help are pitching in, even if they can't do a whole lot, and Flint even journeys into a burning building to save fuel. After saving both lighter and fuel, everything seems like it'll be okay, but another problem surfaces. Hinawa, Klaus, and Lucas haven't returned from their trip to the mountains. Immediately, the search for Hinawa and the kids commences, and once again, following a massive forest fire, everyone pitches in to help find Hinawa and the kids. Even Lighter, who is heavily injured, runs in to help move some fallen trees blocking a pathway to the mountains. It's a small touch, but it fosters a strong sense of community I haven't seen in many other games. I especially like when Flint learns of his wife's death and lashes out at everyone around him, until Lighter finally knocks him out and throws him in the Tasmily jail. It's a raw moment of emotion for the normally speechless Flint, and it's a great way to get across what he's feeling without forcing him to speak. I do have to admit, it's still a bit annoying that the character you control doesn't speak. I can understand Lucas, maybe out of tradition for the series, but playing as Duster and never seeing him talk to Wes or Kumatora until the later chapters when you aren't in control of him is extremely jarring. Thankfully, Lucas benefits the most from being a mute. All of his development is far easier to understand because there's a sufficient build-up to his character in the beginning. A shy yet happy child suddenly has his entire family ripped apart. His mother dead, his brother missing, and his father constantly out searching for his brother. Lucas doesn't need to tell anyone what he's going through, it's evident. He grows up with his absentee father, ridiculed by the rest of Tasmily Village because he won't stop searching for Klaus and won't accept happy boxes from Facade. Lucas finds solace in Boney, Duster, and Kumatora, who all readily help him to fight against Facade and the Pig Masks. It creates a strong sense of family that he likely hasn't felt in a long time. Duster and Kumatora don't have the same level of growth, but their characters are brilliantly established. Duster is an outcast thanks to his misshapen appearance and injured leg, but when you get to know him, he's an all-around nice guy. He helps out whenever he's asked, and he even lets Flint know that if he ever needs help, he'll be there. He drops everything to help Lucas, even though they don't know each other that well, and it's easy to believe because Duster is such a nice guy. Kumatora kind of falls into that same category. A bit of a tomboy, just as much of an outcast being raised by the Magypsies, and she readily helps out when she learns what's happening to the Nowhere Islands. Though the game never outright says this, I'm willing to bet Kumatora and Duster fill in the lost parental figures of Lucas's life, if even just a little bit. Developing Tazmily doesn't just have the benefit of making better protagonists, it also has the benefit of making better antagonists. The reason Hinawa dies is because Porky has a ton of dangerous experiments run on the Dragos and other animals to make chimeras. His reasoning for doing so is that the animals in the Nowhere Islands aren't cool enough, so he wants to make them cooler with the power of science. As it turns out, fucking with the Dragos has made the beasts a bit angry. It sounds strange, but these giant dinosaurs are established to have friendly relations with the people of Tazmily. In the prologue, Lucas and Klaus ram into them and roughhouse with the dinos, and they don't retaliate. In fact, they look quite happy playing with Lucas and Klaus. It comes as a surprise to the people of Tazmily that a Drago would harm anyone, because they were observed to be so peaceful. It would be like if you lived near a group of friendly gorillas who have never done anything bad to you in your entire life, and then one day they just killed you. Alright, not my best metaphor, but I think you get what I mean. It's a massive wake-up call for the entire village, and this sorrow is the perfect weakness for Facade and the Pig Masks to latch onto. They start their invasion with the happy boxes. Not everyone falls victim to them at first, but Facade is able to convince at least a few people that he can give them happiness. During the chapter when you play as Salsa, you get to witness firsthand how cruel Facade really is. He captures Salsa's girlfriend, wraps a shock collar around his neck, and shocks Salsa whenever he does something wrong. Or sometimes he just shocks Salsa for the hell of it. He has you deliver the happy boxes to each of the 4 homes, practically making you enact slave labor through gameplay. Nothing about it is fun. You need to travel a pretty long distance to even get one of the damn boxes, but the catch is that you can only carry one at a time, and you can't run while you're carrying one. So you go from the graveyard to one of the houses, and then back to the graveyard about 4 times. Only for Facade to rob you of your reward no matter how quickly you get it done. It's fitting that the only person who sees through Facade's act and actually does something about it is Kumatora. With the help of Wes, they free Salsa and help him find his girlfriend. This is when the line in the sand is drawn between the people who fall victim to the new regime and those that oppose it. Flint, Duster, Kumatora, Wes, Alec, Lucas, Salsa, and Boney all oppose the new regime, while everyone else more or less goes along with it. They may not always agree, but the change comes in so many small doses that at some point, villagers like Bronson who are opposed to the new system eventually start following everyone else. Tazmily gains a currency when previously there was no exchange system, and this small country town gets transformed into a bumbling suburb similar to Onet from EarthBound. Alec and Wes are forced into an old folks' home to keep them from warning the other villagers, and there's a giant tower striking lightning on the houses of everyone who won't conform. They even destroy the fortune teller's house, who likely foresaw the invasion of the Pig Masks and opposed their regime. Everyone who accepted a happy box into their lives is now living in a bit of an industrial era. The males go off to work in the factory every day, and their reward is payment and a ticket to Club Titty-Boo, where they relax and listen to music from the DCMC, an analog for the Runaway 5. They also serve the function of keeping Tazmily controlled through their music, which is all somehow related to Porky and the Pig Masks. It's an elaborate system of control that also serves as a metaphor alluding to the dangerous aspects of capitalism. Though it doesn't just paint capitalism in a negative light, it also highlights how vulnerable humans are. Keep in mind, no one was necessarily forced to change. They volunteered to try out the happy boxes. It was only until everyone was on the side of the Pig Masks that those who opposed the new regime were ostracized as crazy people. It also doesn't seem like anyone is upset that they have to work in a factory every day. They're quite content spending time in Club Titty-Boo and falling into a typical work routine. It's only at the end when the sterility of it all surfaces in a more obvious way. I particularly like how each of the villagers change as the Nowhere Islands reach the later stages of capitalism. Thomas in particular, who was always happy to greet Lucas whenever you met, brushes Lucas off at the end in favor of playing his game. If you bump into him, he gets annoyed with you for breaking his concentration. This once excitable, joyous character has been reduced to a quick-tempered jerk. The entirety of Newport City has a bit of a dull atmosphere, juxtaposed by the extravagance of the city's appearance. It even has the trademark huge building, probably used as a mark of achievement, just as the Empire State Building or the Yokohama Landmark Tower. Note the Landmark Tower. It's even more ironic that the huge building in Newport City doesn't seem to house much significance. Aside from the concert hall, the upper levels are just a bunch of random, disconnected rooms that seem to be filling space more than anything. It makes you question, what really is the point of making such a huge building? What's the point of moving everyone from Tazmily to Newport? Newport City is pretty restrictive in its size compared to Tazmily, which bordered an entire forest and mountain range you could explore. Newport City just has more things to keep you occupied. To say Mother 3 isn't a commentary on the effects of materialism at the very least would be misguided. Now, the game's conclusions to this commentary can be debated until the end of time, but I think it would be much harder to debate that it has no political or literary significance. It's a game about a whole host of different things, and what I like most about it is that it doesn't discontinue the wackiness the series is known for. You still visit Saturn Valley, you get high on mushrooms and hallucinate. The Magypsies, though problematic in their portrayal of trans people, are at least memorable because of how out of the ordinary they are. There are tons of lighter moments to keep the tone consistent with previous games. When Alec travels with Flint to find Klaus, Alec cracks a bunch of jokes along the way, urging Flint to smile more. Some awkward bonding with Flint's father-in-law. Fun fact, the song that plays while they're together is called With My Father-in-Law, so I think the game knows exactly what mood it's going for there. Or how about the rope snake, who fails to keep everyone on the helicopter and has his own little mini-arc where he's disappointed in himself, but wishes to prove himself once more to help the group get out of Saturn Valley when they're trapped. Or how about the ghosts in Oso Castle? There's one playing the piano, there's one trying to drink wine but it falls right through him, there's one cooking food, and of course there's the crazy musician at the top. At the heart of it all, ignoring the capitalist commentary, ignoring the wacky moments, the strong character building, Mother 3 is still a story about a wounded family right up to the end. Everything about the end is fitting, but it leaves so much up to your imagination. What happens when Lucas pulls the final needle? What happened to Porky in his absolutely safe capsule? Did he get what he wanted all of those years, or was it a case of childish desire that he'll regret for the rest of his immortal life? What of the pig masks, who seem to be as much victims as the people in Tazmily? They're presented as a bit goofy and incompetent, a lot like the stormtroopers from Star Wars. One of them even looks after the bunnies in the snowy Magypsy house after you pull the needle and they phase out of existence. They're interchangeable with the denizens of Tazmily, and because of that, it's easy to sympathize with them. What of Facade? It's revealed that he was one of the Magypsies. So why did he betray the other Magypsies, and why did none of the other Magypsies ever mention him? Then, of course, there are the broader questions the game raises. Is materialism inherently bad, or is it just the puppet masters that make it bad? How responsible are the people under an oppressive regime for continuing the existence of said regime? The best part is that the gameplay rarely impairs the meaning of the work, and often goes out of its way to enhance the meaning. Playing as Lucas in the factory, doing the tedious work of finding clay men and returning them back to the surface to be recharged, allows you to connect with the workers' daily routine, and you can better understand their release at Club Titiboo after exhausting themselves physically and mentally day in and day out. On Taintain Island, you hallucinate various people you've met across your adventure, and it's quite easy to fall for all of their tricks. You'll walk up to Flint, talk with him, and all of a sudden it's a battle. Or you'll enter a hot spring, Boney suspiciously absent, until you return and realize it was a pool of mud and garbage. You can weaken one of the boss pig masks by showing him a DCMC pamphlet because he's such a big DCMC fanboy. I mentioned this before, but you even act as a servant to Facade, dancing for him correctly, delivering happy boxes to people, and fighting his battles for him in the desert as he sits back and watches you struggle. It's a beautiful feat, but even more beautiful are the improvements to the dungeon design, combat, and encounter systems, the three core issues I had with EarthBound. Mother 3's dungeons are less dungeons and more a collection of rooms along the main linear path to the end of the game. There's very little freedom in Mother 3, outside of the cities you enter, which is basically exactly like EarthBound. EarthBound had a degree of freedom, but progression was very much railroaded into specific paths you had to follow. The freedom it allowed was more of an illusion than a reality, because many of the spaces were large and expansive. Mother 3 is a lot more linear hallway than it is open areas, but it still manages to pack in just as many secret present boxes and items to find if you go out of your way to look for them. They liberally place shops, save frogs, and hot springs to keep you in tip-top shape, and easily bypasses the issue of running into a boss when you're low on PSI or health. It even goes a step further than EarthBound and adds secret optional bosses to fight for better weapons and tougher challenges. I wish there were more than just 3 of them, but the fact that there are even optional encounters at all is pretty impressive. The save system is a marked improvement, allowing you 2 choices upon getting a game over. Try again, which allows you to respawn at a checkpoint with the same experience and items as the moment you died, or return to your last save. As I said, there are hot springs everywhere, and even when there aren't, there's a sense of convenience before almost every fight. There's always a save frog so you can withdraw DP, and there's always a mole cricket to buy healing items from or to buy better equipment. It's always conveniently in one place, as opposed to the scattershot design of EarthBound that led to many areas lacking doctors or hotels when they desperately could have used some. Additionally, there's now a run button, so you can increase your top speed without a consumable item. Even though the linear corridors make it pretty difficult to dodge enemies, especially when you have 4 party members, it's a lot more possible in this game than it has been before. Enemies don't immediately run to you. They have a moment where they see you, stand still, and then run to you. You don't get around them very often, but there are those rare times where it makes all the difference. Enemies also don't respawn until you leave and re-enter the entire room. You no longer have to worry about enemies spawning right behind you. If you clear out a room, as long as you don't leave it, the room will be empty. Dungeon-like areas come in quick bursts. Enter a cave and a lava area, and then you're quickly out into a rest point, after which you fight a boss. There's never a fear of going the wrong way or getting lost. The way forward is always clear, and the dungeons aren't hampered by being too long and designed to lead you astray so you bump into as many enemies as possible. The fights are also allowed to have more strategy, because using PSI isn't as damaging as it was in previous games. If you know there will likely be an opportunity to restore your PSI points right around the corner, you can go into fights with a bit more of a strategic mind. You can use thunder and shield a lot more, and you aren't punished for it. Battles feel more kinetic because they now have an interactive element revolving around the dozens of battle songs unique to each enemy. Not only are the battle songs good, but they allow you to power up your normal attacks if you have the dexterity. If you can time your A button presses in sync with the beat of the song currently playing, you can get up to 16 additional hits. It can take a 100 power attack up into the 300 to 400 power range in a single turn. There's a significant benefit to learning each of the songs, and it gives you a much better option to finish fights when you've run out of PSI. I'm pretty okay at the system, but I'm musically inept, and when the songs get more challenging, I all but checked out. I learned the beat of the song by throwing myself at a wall rather than listening to the song, because I'm just not very good at picking out the beat. That's completely fine though, because it's more a personal issue than a game issue. There's an item called the Hypno Pendulum to put enemies to sleep, which allows you to hear their heartbeats. You can use their heartbeat to help you figure out when you're supposed to press A. The differing complexities in song choices makes some of the later bosses a lot more difficult to combo. And instead of trying to explain why this is through music theory that I confess to knowing absolutely nothing about, I'll leave a link for you to check out in the description. It goes into more detail on how each song is different, and how to determine what each of the beats are. The Mother battle system has always felt like a test of endurance more than anything, since your party is a lot weaker than the enemies you fight, so the goal is to whittle them down and kill them as fast as possible. Giving you an avenue to end fights more quickly through more interactive means is genius, and it improves the pace of battles that may have been slower otherwise. Speaking of slow battles, boss fights are as tough as ever in probably the best way. With the exception of some of the early game bosses where you're by yourself, I always felt like I was prepared for a boss fight, but they were never a cakewalk. Bosses like the Jealous Base and the Mecha Drago don't feel optimized for only having 1 or 2 party members, so they feel a bit like the more luck-based first encounters of every Pokemon game, where your starter and their starter only know scratch and growl. But the other bosses are really cool, especially the Barrier Trio, Miracle Facade, and the Masked Man. The Barrier Trio in particular make use of the combat system the best of any fight in the series. They constantly change poses the more damage you do to them, prompting you to use Boney to figure out what their new weakness is. It's also a race to get them to change poses, because it takes them a turn to do so, which gives you the proper time to take advantage of the rolling health meter and heal up. Sure, there are moments where I wish the game wouldn't cycle through every party member being hit one at a time, but in general it was much easier to keep everyone healed because the health counts are much higher when the game starts getting tough. It also strikes that fine balance where it's still quite hard to cycle through your menu and heal everyone quickly, savoring those intense moments from EarthBound where you save a party member just in the nick of time. Anyway, once you start any boss fight, including this one with the barrier trio, your first logical move is to start buffing and debuffing the enemy. You have Kumatora and Duster lower the barrier trio's offense and defense to keep them from doing too much damage, and then have Lucas shield everyone up and get everyone's offense and defense increased. He's also the de facto healer, so once you're done buffing, if anyone's in need of critical healing, Lucas is right for the job. Kumatora can heal as well, but she's going to be the de facto damage dealer in the fight, using her most powerful PSI abilities depending on whatever weakness the barrier trio is using at any given moment. Duster is mostly the attacker, and Boney has most of my helpful healing or revival items because he's the fastest character. However, they each have their drawbacks, which can make decision making even more deliberate. Lucas has the highest strength stat in the game, meaning his bash attacks do the most damage. But since he has the most potent healing and the best buff potential, choosing to attack as Lucas should be done very conservatively, because a turn where Lucas is attacking means a turn where the rest of the party might not get powerful healing. Likewise, Kumatora has the lowest strength stat, and her healing is also pretty average. Whenever Kumatora isn't using her offensive PSI, she's a bit less useful. Duster and Boney can't even use PSI, so you're forced to use some of their other abilities. There's the Hypno Pendulum to put enemies to sleep, the Tickle Stick and Scary Mask to lower enemy offense and defense even further than Kumatora can, or the Sniff to scope out enemies, just like Jeff's Spy ability. This is a level of strategy EarthBound never seemed to reach for me, especially considering Mother 3 also has the added benefit of making you feel horrible for mistiming the musical notes. Not only does it make you feel like a talentless tone-deaf hack, it also prolongs the fight because you do so much less damage. The longer the fight goes on, the easier it is for you to lose, so you're definitely incentivized to learn the song and get really good at tapping the A button in sync. It's incredible just how fun Mother 3 is in a vacuum, which is largely where EarthBound fell short for me because of its inconvenient placement of key vendors and longer dungeon length. It goes to show making a more convenient, streamlined experience can go a long way toward making an overall more pleasant experience, while still maintaining a level of difficulty that matches, if not exceeds, earlier games. You don't have to kick the feet out from under the player to give them a worthwhile challenge. This all contributes to Mother 3, and I don't have to put up with the gameplay of Mother 3 to enjoy the narrative presentation like I have to with EarthBound. There's a really fun game here, but that gameplay also enhances the narrative, and that narrative is even more multi-layered than the games preceding it while keeping the tone consistent with the lighter, wackier nature of EarthBound. It's the closest I've seen a video game come to literature, which isn't to imply that games aren't art, but more to say that Mother 3 is quite the work. Not only will I probably play Mother 3 again, but I'll definitely play it over Mother or EarthBound because it provides exactly what those games provide, in addition to so much more. I really do love Mother 3. That concludes my 5th retrospective on the Mother games. Lots of controversial statements, no doubt, but I'm glad I finally found the game for me. At the end of it all, though I don't enjoy Mother or EarthBound as much as other people, at least I came out of it all to find one of my favorite games ever made. I hope somewhere along this batch of videos, I said something that at least resonated with you on some level, even if you didn't agree with anything else I said. Thanks for humoring my opinions, above all else. If you liked the video, consider supporting my work on Patreon. Even $1 is way more than enough support, and I appreciate each and every one of you already supporting me. Please do not feel pressured to donate, only do it if you're able and willing. Feel free to discuss in the comments. Agree, disagree, be sure to let me know. I love discussion, and I'm so glad to have commenters who don't bullshit me. It's part of the reason I even clarified some of the points I made in my EarthBound video. So please feel free to critique my work, just be polite about it. Until the next video, my name has been KingK, and I certainly hope you have some well-deserved fun today.